Unsea, the age-old cure for all that we forgot about. Methuselah's beard, old man's beard, the lungs of the forest. No matter what name it goes by, Unsea has been around to support life on Earth for millions of years. It's an ancient thing that thrives on the dead to keep the living alive. Welcome to the strange and wonderful world of Unsea, the lichen that kept civilizations alive for as long as mankind has been around. And yet, you've probably never even heard of it before. When you see the way Unsea looks and where it grows, it almost reminds you of a dreary horror movie set in the gloomy forest where Dracula lies in wait. Unsea is both a plant, and yet it's not. Are you confused? Let's explain this very complex set of events in as simple a way as we possibly can. Under unique circumstances, and with enough moisture, algae and fungus come together, and they form an entirely new structure, a new organism. Unsea grows mostly on dead or dying organic matter, like fallen branches and lifeless trees. And if there aren't fallen trees or dead branches around, they've been observed to grow over the bleached bones of long-dead animals and humans. As long as their home was once living, they'll grow on it. It encases the structure they find themselves on, creating a canopy of gray-green fungus that looks a little bit like sea coral. Most hikers and passers-by will think that the fungus is a long-dead plant that just decayed in place, but it is, in fact, very much alive and constantly growing. It's spread across the northern hemisphere from the Americas right across to Europe, Russia, and Asia. And every time our ancestors found a medically relevant source to treat their ailments, they wove it into their beliefs and folklore. We see this all across the world, and for very good reason. The importance of a plant that could keep your people alive in a world where nature and the elements are always against you is bound to inspire imagination. But these magical tales also kept life-saving knowledge alive, so that word of mouth could keep the vital information going for many generations more. And like many of you know by now, here at the Medicinal Backyard, we love the history and folk tales that are tied to each plant we cover, just as much as we love the healing attributes our subjects bring to us. So let's get right into it. In Europe, apothecaries would intentionally spread the fungus to grow on skulls and bones, to keep a fresh supply on hand. They could have probably done just as well to grow Unsea on sticks and rocks and carried those around, but traveling doctors never missed a chance to create a little dramatic ambiance. Norsemen and Brits told stories of how the sprites used Unsea as a ladder to climb to the very tops of the trees so that they could whisper secrets into the wind, and locks of Unsea were hung on doorways and windows to ward off evil spirits. Medicinally, the Europeans used it for abdominal complications and even to treat food poisoning. More serious respiratory infections like bronchitis, tuberculosis, and pneumonia were tackled with Unsea too. Outward applications included treatments for both minor scrapes and seriously corrupted wounds that showed signs of gangrene. The Greeks had an entire trade set around the sale of Unsea. Sure, they treated the usual diseases with it, but mostly the Greeks wanted it to treat the wide range of sexually transmitted diseases that their brothels and many conquests brought home. There are quite a few stories around Unsea and its likeness to a lady's, well, you can fill in the blank. Let's keep this round family-friendly. In the Americas, it was called Chanwizi, which means spirit of the north wind. They believed that Unsea only grew on the north side of trees. This is, however, not true. Unsea will grow on anything that provides it with the most moisture. They used it mainly for outward applications, like seriously infected wounds and burns. It was prescribed as a gargle for mouth ulcers and tooth and gum infections. They also saw its positive effects on respiratory diseases. But here, it was usually added in combination with other medicinal herbs that also targeted conditions related to the chest, and the Native Americans used it to expel poisons from snake and spider bites. Chinese records on Unsea date back 2,000 years, and they probably had the widest scope for its applications. It was predominantly prescribed in tea form to treat every vital organ, intestines, kidneys, heart, lungs, you name it. They also added it to other medicinal teas to boost the immune system and to treat fevers and chills. There are a handful of mentions of it cropping up in Egypt, too, though this was undoubtedly imported from northern regions since Unsea couldn't possibly grow in the hot and dry climate of Africa. And in modern times, our professionals picked up Unsea to study whether or not the unassuming lichen really did pack the punch that the previous generations claimed it did. And it turns out, we've been underselling this fungal growth. It wasn't just a medicinal staple for communities back then. It is actually a game changer on the medicinal front right now. Let's start with its applications to respiratory conditions. They observed that it is a gram-positive inhibitor. This means that Unsea slows or completely stops the growth and spread of bacteria strains that cause diseases like tuberculosis, pneumonia, and strep. Unsea also loosens phlegm by thinning it enough that it can be dislodged more easily with coughing. It contains isolated usnic properties. Okay, that's another mouthful. Let's put it in simpler terms. These are antibiotic properties. When the word antibiotic comes up, everyone should get very excited. This opens up the scope of treatment options enormously for infections inside and outside the body, bacteria, fungi, amoebas, and viruses, inflamed tissues, fever. There is almost no end to what antibiotics can treat. Everything from a cut on your hand to a kidney infection, and even a cold, can be treated with antibiotics. These applications are endless. There were small amounts of other organic acids like usneric, famnolic, lobaric, and stintinic acids. They all hold potential for cancer, malaria, ocular infections, and wound bleeding applications. The examination of these organic acids has barely been touched on, so we'll have to keep an eye on that space for now. But it is proven to be a natural antibiotic, antiseptic, antibacterial, antifungal, and anti-inflammatory. Then there's Unsea's use to cure food poisoning and as a poison antidote. There is evidence that the bitter taste could be the reason for this. Anything that is extremely bitter kicks your saliva and stomach acids into overdrive. This increase in acid can break down toxins and, yes, even poisons. Unsea needs very specific conditions in which to thrive. There are ways to keep it going for a while in a damp jar with some plant material like twigs and branches for it to cling to, but these are usually temporary experiments, and the lichen never survives for long. Unsea likes it wet and on the colder side. It can handle full sun during the day, as long as it cools off enough at night so that it can recover from the heat. It's better left to be foraged for. Or, if you're lucky enough, it could be growing naturally on your property already. In that case, you can count on it to be around for most of the year. Unless it's in the dead of winter and everything is covered in snow, Unsea will be growing somewhere where it's damp enough. Unsea is a fantastic absorber of pollutants. That's great for the environment, but not so good for you. Clusters growing close to motorways or factories where heavy metals are pumped into the air are not suitable for human consumption. Unsea is one of the main ways we test for air pollution today. By testing lichen growths in areas that are problematic, we can trace what kind of pollutants and how much of them are in the air. It's one of the most accurate ways to measure air pollution that we have at our disposal. Unsea will break down these heavy metals over time, but chances are that it will still be in the fungus for you to consume when you collect it. Luckily, it's easy enough to spot. It just won't thrive in such conditions. Clusters will be small and stingy, and they won't have that tinge of green on their tendrils as they should have. Instead, they'll be gray and sparse. Ideally, Unsea should be growing thick and tangled, cascading down to create thick tendrils that hang from trees. If you're unsure of the species, Unsea has a white, stretchy inner core. If you pull the fibers apart and tear through the outer layer, this elastic inner tendril will be exposed. There are some smaller varieties out there, but if you find it next to a road, don't even bother collecting it. But out in the forest, away from traffic and fumes, there won't be any danger. Unsea can be hang-dried for later use, but it doesn't store for long. Once it loses its green coloring, it will have lost most of its beneficial qualities. It's best to add it to a tincture or salve as soon as you've harvested it. Salves with a beeswax or tallow base work fantastic. The natural oils in them will hold on to the moisture for months. If you have a fresh supply on hand, you can use it as is for outward wounds. Simply clench the clumps in your fist to bruise the strands. It will need to be fastened with a bandage to keep it in place over the affected area. Tea is one of the best and most effective ways to reap Unsea's benefits. Adding heat releases the moisture inside even better than bruising the strands with pressure. But be warned, it's awfully bitter. Adding some honey or sugar won't take away from its healing qualities, so don't be afraid to add liberal amounts. And combining it with flavored teas or other herbs helps too. And you can never go wrong with some added nutrients in your brew. Tea is also the most direct and efficient way to loosen phlegm and clear congestion, as well as relieving digestive problems like stomach ulcers, cramping, and discomfort from bloating. Take caution when buying Unsea salves, supplements, or tea. The truth is that Unsea doesn't store well, so whatever they're selling, it's probably a fake. A few years ago, there was a diet fad going around that used unregulated products in the form of protein shakes and essential oils. Most of them didn't contain any Unsea at all and caused a slew of intestinal problems, diarrhea, and nausea. The fad went by, like so many others do, but you can still find a few here and there if you dig around online. It's best to forage for it yourself. At least then you'll know what you're getting, and that it will be fresh enough to give you the benefits that you want from it. Unsea is ancient and simply amazing. It heals us and the air around us. How could we have possibly forgotten about this magnificent, all-round cure for all? The best we can do for now is to seek it out ourselves and wait for the scientific community to complete their studies on it. Because one thing's for sure, Unsea has been around to keep the Earth and us healthy for millennia, and it's going to be around for a few millennia more. So were you even aware that the tresses growing in the trees were so incredibly curative? Or are you thinking of going out to find the ancient lichen yourself to add it to your natural pharmaceutical kit? We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more herbal explorations. Disclaimer: I am not a medical doctor. If you are on chronic medication, pregnant, or suffering from any health condition, please consult a medical professional. I am here to relay my own thoughts and opinions. My videos are entirely based on my own research and experiences.